The night begins in quiet layers of sound, the slow breath of the wind, the faint tremor of distant insects, the soft murmur of grass brushing against forgotten concrete. Somewhere, beyond the edge of any known road, lies a small and nameless airfield. Its runways stretch into the darkness like silver scars, cracked and faded, leading toward nothing but the horizon. The hangars stand empty now, their rusted ribs catching the moonlight, their hollow interiors filled with dust and echoes. It is the kind of place where time feels uncertain, where the boundaries between past and present blur until they almost dissolve. The engines that once roared here are long silent, but the air still seems to vibrate faintly, as if remembering the rhythm of flight. You walk slowly through the overgrown path that leads toward the runway. The scent of damp earth and oil lingers in the cool air. Somewhere, a loose sheet of metal flutters softly against a wall, tapping in the wind like a heartbeat. The world feels suspended, a moment between what was and what remains. This airfield, forgotten by most maps, is one of thousands left behind after wars ended, after governments changed, after the great machines of progress moved elsewhere. It is a place caught in permanent dusk, where the past never quite finishes fading. Many such airfields were born in haste. During the Second World War, they were carved out of farmland and forest with remarkable speed, built to serve missions that demanded secrecy and sacrifice. Pilots once lived and died here, their names now erased from the walls where their laughter once echoed. After the wars, many of these bases were abandoned, fenced off, or left to crumble into the landscape. Grass pushed through the cracks in the runway. Control towers lost their glass. The sound of engines was replaced by the quiet rhythm of wind and birds returning to nests in the rafters. But even in their silence, some claimed these places never truly emptied. Over the years, scattered reports began to surface. Locals spoke of lights hovering over the tarmac long after the airfields closed. Strange mechanical hums were heard at midnight, drifting from nowhere. Farmers saw shapes gliding across the treeline, glowing faintly and vanishing when approached. These stories were passed quietly between towns, growing softer with each telling, until they became part of the atmosphere itself, neither believed nor dismissed, simply present, like mist. If you stand still long enough in the middle of an abandoned runway, you can almost sense it. A feeling that something unseen is nearby, just beyond sight. Perhaps it's only imagination, the mind responding to isolation, to the symmetry of man-made emptiness. Or perhaps, as some believe, there are visitors that return to these quiet airfields, drawn to the remnants of old technology, to the ghosts of flight and signal that linger in the soil. Whatever the truth, the sensation is unmistakable, a hum that is not heard but felt, deep in the bones, like the memory of motion. The night deepens, and the air cools. Stars emerge above the control tower, glinting like rivets in the skin of a vast celestial machine. The runway below seems to mirror the sky, each cracked line reflecting a constellation that has shifted since the last aircraft took off here. There is peace in this symmetry, a sense of being between two immensities, the earth that has forgotten and the sky that remembers. The soft rhythm of narration slows further, inviting the listener to breathe with the landscape, to feel the weight of stillness settling around them. The narrator speaks gently of the passage of time, of how human ambition leaves behind relics that nature eventually reclaims. But these airfields are not entirely reclaimed. They remain halfway places, suspended between abandonment and memory. And in that in-between space, mystery thrives. The listener is encouraged to imagine how, decades ago, these same runways glowed under floodlights as crews prepared for missions into unknown skies. Now, only the moonlight remains, yet sometimes that light flickers oddly, as though another source of illumination briefly passes overhead. Such moments are the beginning of the story, the first whispers of what witnesses later called the night visitors. They never arrive with noise or violence. Instead, they drift quietly, as though respecting the silence that has settled here. Some who camped near these sites reported awakening to faint vibrations, a soft pulse that seemed to rise from beneath the ground. Others described seeing a shimmer, like heat above a desert road, but cool to the touch and moving with deliberate grace. The air itself felt aware, they said, attentive. As the listener drifts further into the atmosphere of the tale, the focus is not on fear, but on wonder, on the beauty of forgotten places where mystery has room to breathe. The ruins of human effort become sanctuaries for the unknown, their decaying structures forming a bridge between the physical and the unseen. The narrator's tone remains calm, steady, almost hypnotic, describing each detail with the precision of memory and the softness of dream. The wind rises slightly. A distant owl calls. The night holds steady, endless, and alive. Somewhere beyond the field, a single light flickers, steady, then gone. You might tell yourself it's nothing more than a trick of atmosphere, a glint from metal, or a passing insect. But deep down, you feel something watching, not with menace, but with curiosity, something that has been here far longer than the fences, the towers, or even the war itself. As the section closes, the narration gently invites the listener to settle deeper into the story, to let go of the day's noise and follow the soft hum of the unknown. The forgotten airfield becomes both a place and a state of mind, where history, silence, and mystery intertwine beneath the endless, whispering night. Long before they became ruins, these airfields were the proud outposts of human ambition. They were born in moments of urgency, when nations raced to command the skies. During the Second World War, the landscape of Earth transformed into a patchwork of runways and hangars, hastily built, strategically placed, and humming with the machinery of flight. Thousands of men and women labored under dim lights, laying concrete and assembling aircraft that would cross oceans and continents. Each airfield was a world unto itself, a place of coordination, secrecy, and hope. The engines that roared across those runways were symbols of power, but also of fragility, because every takeoff carried the weight of uncertainty. Many never returned. As wars ended, the reasons for these airfields began to fade, but the structures remained, skeletons of once-breathing machines. Some were repurposed for civilian use, their barracks turned into small airports or industrial parks. Others were simply abandoned, their coordinates quietly erased from maps. Across Europe and North America, you can still find them, silent grids of concrete, crumbling watchtowers, the faint outlines of taxiways overtaken by weeds. In the Pacific Islands, nature moved faster, reclaiming runways with thick vines and palms. What once was the heartbeat of wartime logistics became a still landscape of memory. Then came the Cold War, another era of tension that breathed new life into some of these forgotten spaces. The world once again divided into zones of secrecy. Airfields that had been built for bombers or reconnaissance missions were repurposed for surveillance, for radar testing, or for aircraft that were never meant to be publicly acknowledged. In the early 1950s, reports began surfacing from soldiers stationed at these isolated outposts. They spoke of strange echoes on radar, luminous disks that darted faster than any known aircraft, and objects that vanished in complete silence. Governments took notice, if only because these incidents occurred near sensitive installations. Yet the official statements always downplayed them: reflections, temperature inversions, misidentified stars. The history of forgotten airfields is, in a sense, the history of disappearing truth. Each base has its own story of denial, confusion, and quiet awe. Take the case of the airfields in East Anglia, England, where in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the British Royal Air Force and U.S. Air Force shared several disused runways as observation posts. It was here that one of the most famous encounters occurred, the Rendlesham Forest incident of December 1980. Security personnel reported seeing a glowing triangular craft descending into the woods near the old base perimeter. When they approached, the air crackled with static and the trees seemed to bend toward the light. The event was officially recorded, yet explained away as a combination of a lighthouse beam and imagination. But the witnesses, trained military observers, never accepted that explanation. Decades later, their testimonies remain consistent, soft-spoken, measured, and quietly unsettled. Across the ocean, in New Mexico, a more infamous event had already etched itself into legend. In July 1947, debris from what was first described as a flying disc was found near Roswell Army Airfield. Initial press releases confirmed the recovery of an unidentified object, but within a day, the statement was retracted. The explanation shifted to a weather balloon, then later to a classified military project. The nearby desert airstrips became zones of speculation, visited by reporters and curiosity seekers who found little more than silence and dust. Still, the timing was uncanny. It came just as radar systems were advancing, and pilots worldwide were reporting an increase in encounters with unidentified objects. Other lesser-known stories are scattered across the globe, often overshadowed by these famous cases. In Sweden, during the 1940s, military observers stationed at remote airfields reported ghost rockets streaking across the sky, metallic, silent, and untraceable. In the Soviet Union, declassified KGB archives mention incidents at disused air bases in Siberia where glowing spheres hovered for hours before vanishing. In Australia, abandoned World War II runways near Woomera became associated with sightings of Min-Min lights, mysterious luminous orbs long known in Aboriginal folklore. Each region gave the phenomenon its own cultural vocabulary, but the pattern was unmistakable. The quieter the place, the stranger the sky seemed to become. Historians who have studied the development and decay of these airfields often describe them as liminal zones, spaces caught between utility and ruin. Their geography is uniquely suited to mystery, open, remote, often surrounded by flat horizons and empty skies. Radar operators have long noted that such environments can distort signals, bouncing echoes in unpredictable ways. Psychologists might add that isolation affects perception, that the human mind, when deprived of reference points, invents patterns to fill the void. Yet, even after accounting for radar error and human imagination, there remain events that resist dismissal. Objects tracked simultaneously by radar and the naked eye. Power systems that shut down during sightings. Residual radiation detected where nothing visible landed. For those who worked these airfields during the Cold War, secrecy was a way of life. Pilots were briefed to report nothing unusual outside their mission scope. Engineers were told that unexplained signals were classified noise. Over time, the habit of silence hardened into culture. When the bases were finally closed, they left behind more than structures. They left behind an absence, a quiet place where stories could echo without contradiction. Today, when explorers or historians visit these sites, they often describe an uncanny sensation, as if the air itself holds a memory, or as though something unseen observes from the distance, patiently waiting for the return of human activity. This blend of history and atmosphere gives these forgotten airfields a peculiar duality. They are both factual and mythic. Every cracked runway and leaning tower carries layers of reality, political, technological, psychological, and yet each also invites the imagination to fill in what the records omit. The listener can almost feel the duality while drifting deeper into the narrative. On one hand, this is simply history, the rise and fall of strategic infrastructure. On the other, it is a landscape tuned like an instrument, humming faintly with frequencies left behind by decades of radio transmissions, radar sweeps, and mechanical resonance. The section ends with a soft reflection on the passage of time. The airfields that once represented human control over the sky are now reminders of how small that control truly was. The sky continues to move as it always has, and sometimes it seems to move in ways we cannot yet explain. When night falls on these places, the world grows still, and the faint hum returns, not from engines, but from something deeper, something that might still be watching, tracing the outlines of our forgotten runways under the indifferent, endless stars. Night has a way of changing the world. When darkness folds over a landscape, it reshapes perception, softens detail, and deepens sound. The old airfields that seem harmless under daylight take on a different quality after sunset. Their silence becomes a kind of presence. In the black expanse of the runway, every flicker of light feels alive, every echo seems intentional. This is when the stories begin, the quiet recollections of those who have stood watch at these forgotten places long after the world moved on. Their voices, collected over decades, form a tapestry of human testimony that stretches from the end of World War II to the present. Some of the earliest accounts come from caretakers and night watchmen, men who were hired to guard derelict hangars or fuel depots after the bases closed. They described nights so still that they could hear their own footsteps echo across the cracked pavement. One such man, a caretaker at an airfield in rural Wales, told of how the runway lights would sometimes flicker on by themselves, powered by circuits that had been disconnected years before. He would step outside his cabin to see a faint illumination along the tarmac, as if guiding something invisible to land. When he walked toward the glow, it would fade, leaving nothing but cold wind and the faint scent of ozone. In the American Midwest, another witness, a mechanic who lived in a trailer near an old training field, reported seeing orbs of blue light hovering above the control tower on multiple occasions in the 1960s. He described them as silent and perfectly round, with no visible structure. Once, they drifted close enough for him to feel a vibration in the air, a low hum that pressed gently against his chest. The next morning, he found a pattern of scorched grass near the tower's foundation, perfectly circular, as though the earth had been briefly exposed to heat without flame. When he reported it to the local authorities, they suggested ball lightning or electrical discharge, but no storms had passed through that week. He eventually stopped mentioning it, saying that whatever it was didn't seem to want to be chased. Eyewitnesses from Europe, particularly near the Baltic and Nordic regions, describe similar experiences. A retired radar technician from Finland recalled a night in 1959 when an unknown object appeared on his instruments, a fast-moving signal that broke from known flight paths and came to a complete stop above an inactive base. He stepped outside to see a cluster of white lights, motionless and silent, suspended high above the airfield. The radar continued to show a stationary return for nearly 4 minutes before the object accelerated straight upward and vanished from the screen. In the official log, his supervisor wrote, "Equipment malfunction due to temperature interference." But the technician who worked with radar for 20 years swore the system was functioning perfectly. There are patterns in these stories, but also a deep emotional consistency. Witnesses often describe a mix of wonder and fear, but not terror, more like an awareness that they were standing near something vast and incomprehensible. Psychologists who study such cases refer to this as the uncanny threshold, a state where the brain recognizes familiar shapes and sounds but senses something fundamentally different beneath them. Darkness, isolation, and expectation amplify this feeling, making ordinary stimuli seem extraordinary. Yet when researchers compare the testimonies, they find overlapping details that are difficult to dismiss: the same kind of light, the same absence of sound, the same peculiar stillness in the air before and after. Sometimes the experiences are collective. In one case from 1973, a small team of amateur pilots camping near a disused airstrip in France witnessed what they called a metallic dawn, a brief, silver illumination that rolled silently over the horizon at 2 a.m., lighting up the entire field for several seconds. Their cameras failed to capture it, and the nearby electrical grid temporarily shut down. The event was reported to local gendarmerie, but no cause was found. The official statement suggested a meteor or atmospheric reflection, yet witnesses insisted the light moved horizontally, not downward. For years afterward, locals claimed that animals avoided the site at night, refusing to cross the open runway even when led by their owners. It is not only light that defines these encounters, but also sound, or its absence. Pilots and ground crew alike have reported moments when ambient noise seemed to vanish completely, as though the world had been muted. No insects, no wind, no distant hum of traffic. This sound vacuum often preceded sightings of luminous shapes or hovering objects. One night observer from an airfield in Canada described it as the air tightening, a pressure that built up before releasing into stillness. When he looked up, he saw what appeared to be a flattened sphere glowing a dull red, rotating slowly above the treeline. It rose vertically, leaving a faint spiral of vapor before disappearing into cloud cover. The observer noted that after the sighting, his wristwatch had stopped at the exact minute the object appeared, an event that was later confirmed when he filed a report with the Department of Transport. Official investigations into such accounts have always maintained an air of skepticism. Meteorological anomalies, electrical interference, reflections from distant aircraft, these are the standard explanations. Yet, the same government files often contain handwritten notes by investigators admitting the data did not fit these theories. Some entries simply read, "No known cause identified." Still, the witnesses themselves rarely sought fame or attention. Their tone in interviews and letters was not dramatic but contemplative. They spoke of curiosity more than conviction, as though aware that their experiences existed on the edge of understanding. What makes these testimonies especially compelling is how they transcend geography and culture. In rural Japan, former airbase staff spoke of silent visitors, pale shapes that drifted through fog after midnight, leaving patterns in the frost. In Argentina, a group of ex-military workers at a decommissioned field near Córdoba reported seeing a craft without shadow hovering low over the ground, illuminating a wide area with diffuse light. They too felt that hum beneath their feet, as though the earth itself were resonating. These accounts, gathered decades apart, describe phenomena that are eerily consistent. There is a rhythm to the way these witnesses speak. Pauses, hesitations, the search for words to describe something that resists description. Their language is careful, as if they fear misrepresenting what they saw. Some mention time distortion, moments stretching longer than they should, or memories that feel fragmented, as if only partially recorded. A few experienced physiological effects, nausea, disorientation, temporary memory loss. Yet, medical examinations revealed nothing conclusive. Researchers who reviewed these reports noticed one curious trend. In nearly all of them, the event occurred between midnight and 3 a.m., and nearly always near sites where old radar or communication equipment still stood. The psychological dimension of these encounters cannot be ignored. Loneliness, fatigue, and the hypnotic repetition of nightly routines can make perception more fluid. The mind, searching for meaning in darkness, builds patterns from uncertainty. But this argument works both ways, for even if imagination shapes the experience, it does not explain the simultaneous radar traces, power fluctuations, or compass interference often recorded alongside them. The phenomenon, whatever it is, interacts not only with human senses but also with technology, leaving traces that hint at physical reality. As the narration flows deeper into calm reflection, the focus turns to what these witnesses truly represent, a bridge between the known and the unknown. They are the keepers of moments when the boundaries of explanation briefly open. The tone remains hushed, respectful, inviting the listener to consider how ordinary people, working lonely shifts at forgotten airfields, became participants in a mystery larger than themselves. They did not seek these experiences. They simply looked up, and something looked back. The section closes gently, returning to the soft imagery of the night. A single lantern flickers in a small guardhouse. The runway stretches out under starlight, endless and empty. The wind moves through broken fences, carrying the faint smell of fuel and rain. Somewhere in the distance, a light blinks once, twice, then disappears. Perhaps it is a trick of vision, or perhaps, as so many have quietly wondered, it is the same presence that has visited these fields for generations, watching patiently, choosing the silence of night to make itself known. And as the listener exhales, sinking deeper into stillness, that quiet hum seems to return, a soft pulse beneath the story, steady and unbroken, guiding them toward sleep. In the quiet corridors of bureaucracy, where language is measured and emotion is stripped away, the story of the night visitors takes on another form, the form of official documentation. Governments, militaries, and intelligence agencies across the world have all encountered the same puzzle that haunted the witnesses of those forgotten airfields. Unidentified lights, unexplained signals, and objects behaving beyond the known limits of aviation. But in the world of official reports, mystery becomes data, and awe is replaced with procedure. The tone shifts from human wonder to administrative restraint. And yet, even through the cold language of these documents, something extraordinary persists. In the years immediately following World War II, the United States and its allies began recording a growing number of strange aerial phenomena. In 1947, following the Roswell incident and a wave of pilot sightings, the U.S. Air Force established Project Sign, the first official investigation into unidentified flying objects. It was soon replaced by Project Grudge, and later by the more well-known Project Blue Book, which operated until 1969. Over those 2 decades, more than 12,000 reports were collected, sightings from air bases, radar operators, and trained observers who knew the sky better than anyone else. Most were explained as stars, weather balloons, or optical illusions. But about 700 cases remained unresolved, marked in the files as insufficient data. Among those were several incidents reported near inactive or restricted airfields, locations considered ideal for classified testing. Yet, even within military circles, whispers circulated that not all of these encounters were of human origin. Across the Atlantic, the British Ministry of Defense maintained its own archive of UFO reports, many connected to remote RAF installations. The tone of these British files is similar to the American ones, precise, dispassionate, filled with acronyms and procedural jargon. But between the lines, the unease is visible. One file from 1963 describes unidentified luminous phenomena near an abandoned base in Lincolnshire, detected by both radar and visual observation. The notation reads, "Object stationary for approximately 2 minutes, elevation 45 degrees. No aircraft in vicinity. Possible astronomical misidentification." The word possible appears repeatedly throughout these reports, a small linguistic tremor hinting that even officials were unsure. In the Soviet Union, similar reports existed, though they remained buried under layers of secrecy until the 1990s. Declassified KGB and military documents reference encounters near disused Cold War airstrips in Siberia and Kazakhstan. Soldiers described glowing spheres that hovered silently over radar stations before vanishing. In one case, instruments reportedly registered strong electromagnetic fields and brief equipment shutdowns. The official conclusion was unknown natural atmospheric process, but within internal memos, some analysts speculated about foreign reconnaissance devices utilizing unconventional propulsion. Even in a system that discouraged speculation, curiosity persisted. What makes these government archives fascinating is not only their content but their tone, the deliberate attempt to sound certain where certainty is impossible. The reports use passive voice and neutral phrasing to contain the inexplicable. Anomalous radar returns observed. Unidentified luminous object sighted. No known aircraft correlated. This language is a defense mechanism designed to keep the mystery from spilling into panic. Yet the sheer number of such entries, scattered across decades and continents, suggests a persistent pattern that officialdom could not completely dismiss. During the Cold War, suspicion clouded every unexplained event. Western analysts often believed these sightings were evidence of Soviet technology, while the Soviets thought they were American experiments. The reality was more ambiguous. In the United States, secret aircraft such as the U-2 spy plane and State Route 71 Blackbird were indeed responsible for some UFO reports. Their extreme altitude and speed baffled radar operators unfamiliar with such designs. But even accounting for these projects, dozens of cases remained unsolved. The Air Force quietly acknowledged this in internal memos, that a small percentage of sightings involved genuine unknowns, objects exhibiting behavior beyond known physics, acceleration without inertia, silent hovering, instantaneous direction changes. In 1952, a wave of sightings over Washington, D.C., including radar confirmation from both civilian and military stations, triggered temporary panic. Fighter jets were scrambled, but nothing could be intercepted. The official explanation was temperature inversion, a phenomenon where warm air traps radar signals and causes false returns. Yet the radar operators involved insisted that these were solid targets, moving intelligently. In the years that followed, similar inversion explanations appeared in reports from bases in Germany, Canada, and Japan. To the public, these explanations were reassuring. To those inside the system, they often felt like carefully constructed placeholders. The Rendlesham Forest incident, already mentioned in earlier sections, serves as a perfect example of this tension between official silence and private curiosity. The original U.S. Air Force memo, written by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, was factual and restrained, describing a metallic object emitting red and blue lights and physical impressions in the soil. When the document was leaked, the Ministry of Defense labeled the event of no defense significance. But in later interviews, Halt and others admitted they had been told not to pursue the matter further. The tone of the memo, polite, meticulous, yet clearly astonished, captures the paradox of these archives. Honesty contained within the boundaries of bureaucracy. The deeper one reads into these declassified files, the more subtle connections emerge. Patterns of timing, geography, and response recur across nations. Many of the most perplexing cases occurred near restricted or decommissioned airfields, especially those equipped with outdated radar or communication systems. Analysts speculated that the lingering electromagnetic activity from these sites might somehow attract or interfere with the phenomena. Others believed the locations were chosen deliberately, isolated enough for observation, but historically significant, as if the visitors were drawn to places that once symbolized human flight. The involvement of intelligence agencies added another layer of complexity. The CIA, NSA, and their counterparts in Europe all monitored UFO reports during the Cold War, not out of belief in extraterrestrial life, but out of concern that mass sightings could be used for psychological warfare. Yet, in their internal assessments, they occasionally admitted the data defied normal explanation. Some documents, released under the Freedom of Information Act, include redacted paragraphs marked "Source withheld," anomalous origin. The ambiguity of that phrase, anomalous origin, has fueled decades of speculation. Beyond the reports themselves, the silence surrounding them became part of the mystery. Many witnesses who submitted official statements later said they were advised not to discuss their experiences publicly. Pilots were told their careers could suffer if they persisted. Radar operators were reassigned. Over time, this institutional caution evolved into mythology. The public, sensing something withheld, filled the gaps with imagination, sometimes wild, sometimes remarkably close to truth. In more recent years, as governments began to release previously classified materials, a shift in tone has occurred. The term UFO has been replaced by UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, a subtle but significant rebranding. It removes the cultural baggage of flying saucers and replaces it with a term that sounds neutral, scientific, acceptable. Yet the essence remains the same. Modern UAP reports from the U.S. Department of Defense echo the same phrases found in 1950s memos. Unidentified aerial objects observed exhibiting advanced flight characteristics, no known technological explanation. The language of mystery endures, polished by 70 years of bureaucracy. For the listener, this section invites quiet reflection on how human institutions respond to the unknown. Faced with something that challenges the boundaries of knowledge, governments record, classify, and contain. The tone is calm, almost soothing, but underneath lies a subtle tension, the feeling that the truth, whatever it is, has always existed at the edge of official acknowledgement. Imagine the vast archives where these documents now rest, shelves lined with binders marked restricted, boxes of faded photographs, reels of radar data gathering dust in climate-controlled rooms. Somewhere among them lie fragments of nights long past, reports from forgotten bases, scribbled notes from tired officers, signatures of people who once stood under strange lights and tried to remain objective. The narrator's voice softens as it draws this section to a close. The bureaucratic distance fades, replaced by a more human tone. Behind every memo, every coded paragraph, was someone who looked up and saw something they couldn't explain. The story pauses here, on the thin line between secrecy and revelation, inviting the listener to imagine those officials, sitting in dim offices, surrounded by silence, staring at their reports and wondering, perhaps just for a moment, whether the night visitors still roam above those forgotten airfields, waiting for someone to notice again. When the official documents fall silent, the imagination of the human mind begins to fill the void, but imagination, in this case, is not wild fantasy. It is inquiry. It is the part of science that dreams while still awake. Across decades of research, scholars, scientists, and independent investigators have tried to answer one question that echoes from those empty airfields. What are the night visitors? What kind of intelligence, force, or phenomenon moves across forgotten runways and slips away before the dawn? In this section, the story turns to the theories, not as rigid explanations, but as windows into the many ways humanity seeks to make sense of the unknown. The most traditional hypothesis, favored by physicists and atmospheric scientists, is that these sightings are natural plasma phenomena, luminous forms of electrical energy that arise under specific environmental conditions. The Earth's magnetic field, they argue, interacts with remnants of radar infrastructure, decaying cables, and metal debris scattered across old bases. These interactions might create temporary electromagnetic discharges, producing glowing orbs or sheets of light that hover and flicker. This could explain the blue or orange spheres, often described by witnesses, and even the humming sounds, vibrations generated by ionized air. Laboratory simulations have reproduced plasma globes that move seemingly intelligently, forming the illusion of controlled flight. Yet, these experiments never fully replicate the duration or precision of the real encounters. The plasma theory remains elegant, but incomplete, a bridge that stops just before reaching the other side. Another explanation comes from the realm of psychology and perception. Researchers of the late 20th century, like Dr. Carl Jung and later cognitive scientists, proposed that the phenomenon might not be entirely external. Jung referred to UFOs as modern myths of things seen in the sky, symbols of collective anxiety and transformation. During times of tension, war, technological upheaval, social uncertainty, the human mind externalizes its unease as visions of the unknown. This view does not deny that witnesses see something real. It simply suggests that the experience is partly created by perception itself. Long nights of isolation, fatigue, and the hypnotic environment of airfields could amplify subtle stimuli into profound experiences. In this interpretation, the night visitors are mirrors, reflections of human curiosity and fear projected onto the sky. Yet, the consistency of radar traces, simultaneous visual sightings, and electromagnetic interference challenges a purely psychological explanation. Something physical still lingers in the data. Then there is the technological hypothesis, one that walks the line between secrecy and speculation. Many researchers believe that at least some sightings near old or remote airfields involve experimental aircraft or unconventional propulsion systems. During the Cold War, both Western and Eastern powers conducted secret tests in isolated areas, using disused runways to conceal their operations. Some of these crafts, prototypes of stealth vehicles, drones, or advanced reconnaissance systems, would have appeared alien to those unfamiliar with them. The problem, however, lies in the timeline. Reports of silent, hovering lights and instantaneous acceleration predate known technological capabilities by decades. Even modern aerospace engineers admit that the movements described in some incidents would generate G-forces impossible for human pilots to survive. Thus, if they are aircraft, they are operating on principles beyond conventional propulsion, perhaps electromagnetic, perhaps something still unknown to public science. A more daring theory steps beyond physics as we understand it. A group of researchers and speculative physicists, often working on the fringes of academia, propose that these phenomena may represent interdimensional or trans-temporal events rather than extraterrestrial visitors. According to this idea, reality may contain overlapping layers or frequencies of existence. Under certain conditions, these layers might momentarily intersect, allowing energy or matter to appear and vanish from our perception. Abandoned airfields, with their vast metal structures and dormant electromagnetic fields, could act as focal points for such interactions. The theory draws on principles from quantum field dynamics and string theory, where the universe is described not as a single solid structure but as a vibrating web of energies. If these vibrations align, through atmospheric conditions, geomagnetic flux, or even human activity, the result might be a visible manifestation, something halfway between presence and absence. There are those who view these encounters through a more spiritual or metaphysical lens. To them, the night visitors are not aliens or scientific phenomena, but intelligences that inhabit thresholds, entities that exist in the liminal space between the physical and the psychological. Anthropologists studying global mythologies note that almost every culture contains stories of luminous beings descending from the sky, often appearing at the edges of human habitation, deserts, mountaintops, or ruins. The parallels to modern airfield sightings are striking. Some indigenous traditions describe lights that guide or warn, others that test human courage. The idea that these visitors might represent ancient archetypes rather than modern spacecraft transforms the mystery from a technological question into a philosophical one. Perhaps the phenomenon is both external and internal, a dialogue between the cosmos and consciousness. Meanwhile, within scientific circles, a quieter conversation persists about the energy signatures recorded during certain sightings. Portable magnetometers and radiation detectors have occasionally measured subtle but measurable anomalies, small spikes in ionizing radiation, disruptions in compass readings, short-lived power fluctuations. These are not the effects of imagination. They suggest that whatever causes these events interacts with the environment in tangible ways. Physicists who have analyzed these readings remain cautious but intrigued. Some point to ball lightning or earthlights, rare geophysical phenomena produced by tectonic stress releasing bursts of electromagnetic energy. These earthlights have been observed near seismic regions and are known to move intelligently, as though following invisible lines of force. It is possible that many of the so-called airfield visitors are expressions of the planet itself, its hidden electricity, its breathing currents of power, briefly visible to the human eye. Still, none of these explanations fully satisfy. The data refuse to conform. For every case that fits the plasma or earthlight model, another involves radar confirmation at high altitude or structured craft with metallic form. For every psychological account, there is a physical trace left behind. For every human experiment theory, there are records that predate the technology. And so, researchers circle endlessly between science and mystery, each theory offering a glimpse of truth but never the whole picture. In recent years, the discussion has evolved with new technology. Advanced imaging, AI-assisted radar analysis, and quantum sensor networks have provided more data than ever before. And yet, the mystery has deepened. The U.S. Department of Defense's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO, and NASA's recent UAP study both conclude that a small fraction of cases display characteristics inconsistent with known physical laws. Some of these modern reports describe spherical objects moving silently against the wind, reflecting light without propulsion, the same description found in handwritten notes from the 1940s. It is as if time has folded back on itself, repeating the same enigma with new tools. As the narration flows gently onward, the tone remains calm, contemplative, inviting the listener not to choose a single theory, but to drift among them as if floating between dreams. Each hypothesis, scientific or mystical, becomes a different note in the same vast symphony of unknowing. Perhaps the truth lies in the overlap. Part plasma, part perception, part something that neither category can contain. The airfields themselves, with their long lines, silent towers, and metallic ghosts, become laboratories of wonder, resonating with the unseen architecture of the world. There is an ancient comfort in trying to explain what resists explanation. The act of theorizing, of building meaning from mystery, connects us to generations before us who looked at the same sky and asked the same question. What moves there, just beyond the stars? The listener, now adrift in the soft rhythm of the narrative, feels this continuity, the shared curiosity of pilots, scientists, and dreamers alike. And as the night deepens over the abandoned airfields, each theory, no matter how rational or improbable, glows faintly like a distant light, another guidepost on the endless runway between knowledge and the unknown. The story of the night visitors is not contained by science or secrecy alone. It has long since escaped into the collective imagination. What began as fleeting lights above forgotten runways has transformed into a cultural mythology, whispered through generations, adapted by filmmakers, novelists, and ordinary dreamers who find meaning in mystery. In this section, we drift into that realm, the landscape of belief, art, and shared imagination, where the strange visitors of silent airfields have found their second life, not as classified data, but as symbols of wonder. The first cultural ripples appeared in the post-war decades, when stories of flying discs and luminous orbs spread beyond military channels and into popular media. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, newspaper headlines began to treat these incidents not as scientific anomalies, but as spectacles, mysterious lights over base, unknown craft startle pilots. The Roswell incident had already set the tone, turning an obscure desert crash into the cornerstone of modern UFO mythology. Yet beneath the sensationalism, there was an undercurrent of genuine curiosity. The public, still living in the shadow of World War II and the atomic age, sensed that humanity had entered a new phase, one where the sky no longer belonged solely to the gods or to nature, but to technology, and perhaps to something beyond technology as well. By the 1960s and 70s, the idea of visitors from the stars had become a dominant theme in cinema and literature. Films like The Day the Earth Stood Still, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and later the X-Files television series did more than entertain. They reinterpreted the anxiety and awe that had surrounded the real sightings at airfields and military installations. In these portrayals, the visitors were not always threatening. Sometimes they were teachers, observers, even saviors. The cultural narrative softened, turning fear into fascination. The language of the unknown shifted from invasion to contact, mirroring a deeper psychological need. The hope that whatever lies beyond the sky might not be hostile, but curious, just as we are. The symbolism of airfields themselves plays a powerful role in this mythology. Abandoned runways and decaying control towers are perfect metaphors for the boundary between known and unknown, past and future. They embody the ghost of human ambition, places once filled with the sound of engines and voices, now left to silence and wind. When people imagine strange lights descending on such places, they are not only thinking of extraterrestrials, they are thinking of forgotten progress, of humanity's old dreams of flight and exploration. The night visitors become reflections of what we once aspired to be, travelers of the infinite. Sociologists have observed that the cultural life of UFO phenomena tends to mirror the psychological state of society. During times of war or technological advancement, sightings increase. During periods of peace or stability, they decline. This pattern suggests that the unknown serves as a kind of emotional barometer, revealing collective tension and desire. In the 1950s, it expressed Cold War anxiety. In the 1970s, it reflected spiritual searching and environmental concern. In the modern era, with its digital noise and loss of mystery, the UFO, or now UAP, has become a symbol of what we no longer understand about our own world. It stands for the return of wonder in an age that believes it has explained everything. Folklorists draw striking parallels between UFO encounters and ancient visitation myths. The luminous beings of Celtic folklore, the sky spirits of Native American traditions, the chariots of fire from biblical accounts, all share the same elements: light, flight, communication between realms. What has changed is only the language of interpretation. Where once people saw angels, now they see spacecraft. Where once there were fairies at the edge of the forest, now there are lights at the edge of the airfield. In this view, the night visitors are not a new phenomenon but an old archetype wearing modern clothing, the eternal symbol of contact with the unknown. This blending of science fiction and spirituality gave birth to what cultural historians call the myth of cosmic companionship, the belief that humanity is not alone and that contact, when it comes, will arrive not in daylight but in silence, under the stars. Bedtime storytellers, podcasters, and filmmakers alike have drawn on this emotional current. The soft pacing of sleep stories that explore these mysteries taps into something primal, the desire to drift off to a narrative that feels both safe and vast, comforting and cosmic. To fall asleep to tales of night visitors is to surrender to the unknown gently, not as fear, but as lullaby. In the 1980s and 90s, abduction narratives added another layer to the mythos, darker, more psychological, but equally influential. Books like Communion by Whitley Strieber and documentaries on alien encounters merged personal trauma with transcendence. These accounts often began in isolated locations: cabins, forests, rural homes, or airfields long out of use. The setting reinforced a recurring motif: that contact occurs where human presence fades, in the places we forget or abandon. Over time, artists reimagine these encounters not as invasions but as symbolic journeys, metaphors for transformation, loss, and awakening. As technology advanced, so did the shape of the narrative. The arrival of the internet turned UFO lore into a global conversation, connecting witnesses, skeptics, and dreamers across continents. Digital forums replaced campfires, and grainy cell phone videos replaced hand-drawn sketches. Yet even in this modern context, the rhythm remained the same. The light appears, the silence follows, the witnesses question. The unknown adapts, but it never disappears. Each generation retells the story with new tools, but the same yearning, the same whisper that there is more beyond the limits of our comprehension. Cultural anthropologists have also noted how these stories provide a sense of belonging in an age of isolation. To believe in something beyond oneself, whether it be extraterrestrial or spiritual, can bring quiet comfort. In sleep-oriented storytelling, the allure of such belief is magnified. The voice of the narrator becomes both guide and witness, leading the listener into a landscape of mystery where rational explanation gently dissolves into wonder. The unknown ceases to be frightening. It becomes soothing, even intimate. In recent years, artists and musicians have begun revisiting the imagery of forgotten airfields and luminous visitors. Ambient composers create soundscapes inspired by radar echoes and nocturnal wind. Visual artists paint runways illuminated by spectral light, symbolizing transition and awakening. Even in virtual reality and immersive cinema, the motif of light descending on the airstrip recurs again and again. It has become a universal symbol, a meeting point between human creativity and cosmic curiosity. The cultural endurance of these stories proves something profound. The mystery itself has become part of who we are. Whether the visitors are real or metaphorical no longer matters. They serve a purpose deeper than evidence. They remind us that wonder is not the opposite of reason. It is what gives reason its direction. The mythology of the night visitors, woven from reports, dreams, and art, continues to expand, adapting to each new generation while keeping its heartbeat, the quiet rhythm of the unknown calling softly through the night. And so, as this section draws to a close, the listener is invited to imagine standing on the cracked tarmac of a forgotten airfield, the air still, the stars endless. In that silence, the world feels ancient and infinite at once. Somewhere in the distance, a light begins to move, slowly, deliberately, with no sound at all. Whether it is plasma, spirit, or visitor no longer matters. What matters is that we are still watching, still wondering, still dreaming. The night visitors have entered our stories, our art, our imagination, and in doing so, they have found immortality. In the modern age, the mystery of the night visitors has evolved, but it has never faded. What was once whispered between pilots and radar operators now unfolds across digital platforms and satellite feeds. With every new report, the story renews itself, shaped by new eyes, new data, and new interpretations. The forgotten airfields that once hosted these silent encounters are no longer centers of activity, yet they remain important symbols, resonating with those who continue to search the skies. The ghosts of history linger there, merging with the hum of modern curiosity. Over the past few decades, official investigations have returned with cautious acknowledgement. Governments that once dismissed such encounters as imagination or atmospheric illusions now admit that unidentified aerial phenomena exist, though their origins remain unknown. Declassified military footage, pilot testimonies, and radar data have reawakened public fascination. The same questions that haunted the 1940s and 1950s now echo in high-resolution video and congressional hearings. It feels as though we've come full circle, back to wonder, but this time armed with technology instead of tales. Yet for all our advancements, the mystery has only deepened. Scientists analyze infrared readings and propulsion anomalies, while others explore consciousness-based theories, suggesting that these lights may not be visitors at all, but manifestations of reality itself responding to observation. The airfields, with their long shadows and weathered control towers, stand as metaphors for this paradox, built for control and measurement, now surrendered to uncertainty. Their silence speaks to a deeper truth, that perhaps the unknown was never meant to be contained, only experienced. Cultural responses have also transformed. Once dismissed as fringe folklore, the topic now occupies a liminal space between science and spirituality. Documentaries frame it as a legitimate mystery of modern physics. Artists and writers portray it as a metaphor for awakening. The night visitors, no longer confined to stories of fear or invasion, have become symbols of interconnectedness, of the thin boundary between human awareness and the vast, intelligent cosmos beyond. In this transformation lies a kind of healing. The lights that once frightened have become beacons of reflection. Psychologists studying eyewitnesses note a recurring effect. After encountering the unexplained, people often report heightened empathy, creativity, and inner calm. The experience alters them not through terror, but through perspective. They describe seeing the world as larger, more fluid, more alive. It's as though the night visitors quietly expand the borders of what it means to be human. This subtle shift, from fear to reverence, mirrors the listener's own transformation as they follow the story. And so, as the narrative nears its final descent, the night visitors remain neither proven nor dismissed. They hover, like the lights themselves, between categories, between science and dream, between history and imagination. Their presence continues to ripple through consciousness, culture, and time, just as softly as moonlight across the broken runways of forgotten airfields. In that silence, mystery becomes comfort. The skies remain vast, the lights distant but kind. The listener, too, feels that quiet expansion, an inner peace born not from answers, but from the acceptance that some questions are meant to remain eternal. As the story turns inward, the mystery of the night visitors begins to soften. The investigation fades, leaving behind a stillness, the kind that lingers after all questions have been asked. The forgotten airfields now feel sacred, like quiet thresholds between worlds. Their cracked runways, once meant for flight, have become places where wonder lands instead of aircraft. In their silence, the air hums with memory, of engines, of voices, of unseen presences that seem to drift just beyond understanding. Across the years, humanity has looked to the skies searching for meaning. Perhaps the night visitors are not invaders from elsewhere but reflections of that longing, the universe holding up a mirror to our curiosity. Scientists speak of plasma and energy fields. Believers speak of beings and messages. But the truth, quiet and patient, might lie in between. These lights remind us that the world is larger than our certainty. For the witnesses who saw them, fear often gave way to awe. Many described feeling not threatened but expanded, as though their sense of reality had grown wider. In that moment, the unknown became a companion rather than a mystery to solve. The visitors seemed to whisper something wordless, that we are not separate from the cosmos, only small parts of its infinite dream. The narrator's tone slows, softer now, as if drifting into the same rhythm as the night itself. Each word becomes a step toward calm. The airfields sleep, yet they listen. The lights above them hover, waiting. And for the listener, peace begins to take shape, not from understanding but from acceptance. The unknown no longer looms, it embraces. The mystery remains, gentle and endless, watching over the quiet world below. As the journey nears its end, the mystery of the night visitors becomes quieter, more inward. After the long path through documents, reports, and folklore, what remains is not evidence but awareness, that humanity has always been in dialogue with the unknown. The forgotten airfields, once alive with the noise of engines, now exist as vast mirrors of silence. In their emptiness, the night seems to listen back. Perhaps the visitors were never intruders from elsewhere but reflections of our own longing, reminders that even in an age of satellites and data, there are still corners of reality that refuse definition. Psychologists call these encounters modern myths, externalized dreams of connection. Philosophers see them as proof that consciousness is wider than reason. For the witnesses, they are simply moments that changed how the sky feels, a subtle but permanent widening of perception. Across history, every civilization has told versions of this same story, lights descending, knowledge expanding, mystery remaining. The pattern suggests that the unknown is not an error in understanding but a vital force that keeps curiosity alive. To wonder is to participate in creation. To rest in uncertainty is to feel the world breathing around you. So, as night deepens, the listener recognizes that the real subject of this story is not the visitors but the space they open. A space where awe replaces fear and imagination replaces certainty. The hum of the unseen becomes a rhythm of calm, a pulse that connects earth and mind. And in that rhythm lies peace, the comfort of knowing that the world will always hold more than we can explain, and that this mystery, ancient, luminous, benevolent, will never truly fade. The final section unfolds like dawn approaching a sleeping runway. The story no longer seeks answers, it seeks stillness. The airfields rest beneath a pale sky, their cracked pavement glowing faintly in moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, a light moves, not approaching, not receding, simply existing. Its silence carries the entire weight of wonder. The narrator's voice slows to a whisper. Each sentence becomes a breath. The listener is invited to let the mystery settle within them, to let the questions soften into calm. Perhaps the visitors were never meant to be solved but simply witnessed, quiet teachers reminding us that peace and uncertainty can coexist. All through history, Humans have looked upward for meaning, and tonight is no different. The forgotten runways symbolize that longing, built for flight, now reclaimed by stillness. The visitors hover at the edge of perception, patient as dreams. In their presence, the vastness of the universe feels gentle rather than cold. Science, myth, and spirit converge here. The unknown becomes a lullaby. The stars, the silence, the soft hum of imagination, all dissolve into one continuous field of rest. The narrator murmurs, "You are safe beneath the wide sky." The airfields sleep. The lights drift, eternal and kind. And so the story closes, not with revelation but with surrender. The listener breathes slower, the world fades to silver quiet. The mystery remains, but it no longer asks to be solved. It only asks to be felt, the soft pulse of existence that hums through every dream, every star, every sleeping heart. The night holds you now, vast and endless, its silence glowing like the faint trace of light above a forgotten field.